was walking down, I thought I would tell you about my late husband, Tony Zutkaitis. And how did I meet him? Well, let me tell you about his early time in life in Lithuania. He lived in a small village, Padua Bay. They had a little acreage, they had a cow, and they had a dog and a cat, and there were rats in the barn that the cow lived in, so the cat was very, very active. And he had a wonderful life. Like, he was a poet too, by the way. And the poets are the prophets in the modern world, I believe. So he just enjoyed life until one day, when he was 16, the Nazis came and they took him to a slave labor camp. So he spent his adolescence there. And then one day, this companion from the same village looked and thought, these Nazis aren't as active as they usually are. They're not overseeing us so strictly the way they used to. And Tony said, you're right. So the other guy said, let's do a bunk, or words to that effect. And they decided that they would leave. And they did. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked at night. During the day, they would sleep under hedges, and they would eat brambles and fruit that they could find. And then one day they were sleeping under the hedge in front of a farmer's house, and the farmer's wife came down and said to them in German that the war was over. Did they know? And they said no. And she said, I don't know how they communicated, but she understood that their language was Lithuanian. And she said, if you go that way, there is a displaced persons camp, and you'll find people who speak your language there. So they did. They walked and they walked until they found it. And then time passed, and I won't go into details about how monotonous this displaced persons camp was, because it's too bad to imagine even. So eventually the Americans came, and the British came, and the Russians came. And it was decided that since Lithuania was near Russia, that the Lithuanians would go to Russia. And they said, no, 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 no. They asked where they wanted to go. And Tony had always dreamt about England. He had seen something about royalty or somehow he had heard about it, so he wanted to go to London. And he went to England, and after a while, he got out of the displaced persons camp. And how he did it was amazing. So all these, and I saw the displaced persons camp in my own place near Glasgow. They were kind of shelter-like buildings that they were housed in, and there were beds in this big area. And then this Jesuit priest came to give them a retreat, and he challenged them. He said, you know, young men, it would be good if some of you thought about training for the priesthood. Now, he said, even if you don't think you've got the vocation to become a priest, the education you would get there would stand you in good term in life. So Tony took him up on this and went to London and trained for the priesthood. But then when it came to it, he was very good at Latin, by the way, and he was sent to Rome. And he studied there, and the language that at the university there was Latin. It was the Gregorian, and everyone spoke Latin in it. So anyway, after it came time for him to accept ordination, and he said no, he did not want to be ordained, and he was kicked out. It was terrible. And he landed up in England, and then he met a woman called Molly Bevan. She was the mother of a big family. And she kind of took him under her wing. And he got a job in insurance. Now, at that time, his parents, he knew nothing about his family in Lithuania because they weren't allowed to communicate, to write letters. And then one day, he was told by another Lithuanian, you can write. So he did, and he got correspondence again. And the Lithuanian situation was, they were very poor. So he sent all the money he had to them. And then he discovered that if he came to Canada, he'd have more money. And he did. Now, at this time, I had just emigrated to Toronto, and I had a room round in Glen Road. It's sharing a house with other girls. And then one of them went around the world, and two of them went back to England. One went to Switzerland, and I was left with this big house to pay a big rent on. So I put a little notice up on a notice board, single lady looking for self-contained accommodation. And this woman answered it. Her name was Rhoda. So she said, I have a place I can show you. It's the basement apartment in my mother's house in East York. So she took me, and I thought it was a good basement, like they had lots of windows in it at a high level. And I said, yes, I'll take it. So she drove me back to Glen Road, and before I got out of the car, she turned to me and she said, why aren't you married? And I said, well, I'm 29. You know, that's kind of late to get married. And she said, nonsense. I was 30 before I got married, and I have two beautiful daughters. You are depriving a good man of a good wife. So I kind of looked at her, and it took the wind away out of me. And I said, oh. It was on my very best Glasgow accent, and I said, do you know any eligible bachelors? And she said, yes, two. One of them is the son of the president of the company that my husband works for, and the other one is my husband's assistant. Oh, thinks I, Either of them Catholic? And she said, yes, I think my husband's assistant is. I said, oh. She said, would you like to meet him? I said, oh, no harm would be done in meeting him. So she arranged for a dinner. And at that dinner, I went back to school the next day, you know, and they had said, how was your blind date? How was your blind date? I said, oh, no. He didn't say a word. Not the whole evening. He didn't say a word during the dinner. Oh, they said, maybe he was just looking at you and judging you and whatnot. You should go out with him again. So Rhoda arranged for another date. And this time, he did start talking. Then I went back to Scotland for the Christmas holidays. And my mother said, I was telling them all about what it was like in Canada and, you know, what it was like. And then she said, have you not got any clicks? Now that is a Scottish expression that means, have you got, you know, a prospective? You know, are you going steady, that kind of thing. So, I told her about Tony, and she said, well, I think that might work out, Molly, you know. I think you should go back and see him again. So I went back, and Rhoda came back and said, you know, would you like to come to my cottage in Aurelia for the weekend? Tony had done an awful lot of work around it was quite a big estate. So I said yes, and we went up on the Friday night. And Tony and I talked until 2 o'clock in the morning. And at that time I thought, oh God, this is definitely getting serious. And so it was. And that's how I met my husband, and that's how I got the name Molly Slotkitis. Thank you for listening.